Today, I have the opportunity to share with you all a very, very special interview and one that is very dear to my heart. I was able to sit down and catch up with Kristoffer Polaha and learn a little bit about what's been going on with his life and some exciting projects he has coming up. So I hope you guys pull up a chair, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready to enjoy this conversation with Kristoffer Polaha. What have been some highlights of 2024 for you so far?
Hi, Mercy. 2024 has been a relatively productive year for me in a rather slow year for the industry in general. So I feel really blessed. The first one, of course, was The Christmas Quest, starring Lacey Chabert and me, and we went to Iceland to film it, and we had this incredible adventure. It was amazing. And the second thing was that in February, I was able to raise money to produce a film that I then directed and starred in called, and we're changing the names. So it's either going to be called The Mimics or just Mimics, The Mimic.
Could you share a little backstory on that movie, maybe what your favorite part of filming it was, and just anything you can share about it?
Yeah, Mimics is this movie that's super close to my heart in the weirdest way. It was filmed in my hometown of Reno, Nevada. The last line of the movie is spoken by my father. It was written by a guy named Mark Oakley, who I went to elementary school with, who I've known since first grade. And it was a dream that I had for exactly 30 years to the summer. So back in 1994, Quentin Tarantino made his movie Pulp Fiction, and I saw that movie in the summer of 94 at a theater in Sparks. And I remember coming home from that movie and just being completely engulfed in this idea, this dream. It was a vision. I mean, it was like a really powerful, like, this is what I'm meant to do. And that was like, I wanted to make a movie, an independent film in Reno, Nevada. And I was specifically in Reno because that's all I knew. I was a junior in high school. And I just knew I wanted to make a movie. And I had this whole idea of the kind of camera shots I would do. And I didn't know what the story was going to be. And I did, in fact, write a script called The Biggest Little City when I was working on North Shore, which took place in Reno, Nevada, about these two brothers. And it's a really beautiful story. And at some point, I'm going to make that too. But that was 2004. So that was 10 years after that dream started. And I fostered that script. I just had a really hard time raising the money for it. Just didn't know how to raise money for a feature film. But enough stuff happened in my life with The Shift and with Wonder Woman and with all of these, and with Hallmark, frankly. Like, a lot of those movies have given me some currency. And so I was able to go to people with deep pockets and say, hey, do you want to invest in a film? Now, the reason why it's Mimics and not The Biggest Little City is because I outgrew the character in The Biggest Little City. I got too old for him. So I think one day I'm going to make it with my son, Micah. I'll direct it and Micah can star in it. But so really, like, it's something, it's a dream that I've nurtured for 30 years. And in the fact that we filmed it the very summer of 2024, I don't know, I thought there was a lot of cool symmetry with that. And the fact that my dad was in it, the fact that it was my hometown, it was a really special moment. So there was a lot of cool things about it.
What advice would you give to someone who has, like, a dream like that when they're, in high school or something like that, and it kind of feels like it's never going to happen or something like that? What advice would you give them?
I mean, the only advice you can give to people who are dead set on a dream is to keep going. Even when everything in your life is telling you to stop, you have to, in this almost crazy way, keep going. I remember, when I first wanted to be an actor, I was rejected almost like 102 times or 120 times. I forget the number now, but like it was a lot of rejection. It was a lot of people telling me no. And I had to ask myself, like, well, am I any good? Like, maybe I'm just not good enough to do this professionally. Like, everybody wants to be an actor, but not everybody gets to be. And, you know, the thing about making movies is it really is a miracle. I mean, it really is. If you can get the money, it's so much money. And then you got to hire all the right people, and that's not easy. And you got to have a good story to tell, and that's not easy. And there are so many factors that are conspiring. Miracle. It really feels like this extraordinary thing. And I can't tell you how many movies I've tried to produce over the last 30 years. Since North Shore on 2004, I've pitched to Fox, to CBS, to CW. I have tried to raise money, again, for The Biggest Little City. I've tried to raise money for this other movie I want to do. Anna Gomez and I are trying to get moments like this off the ground. So it's not like, you know, getting people to invest in you is a pretty big deal. And there's a lot of no's that are going to come your way. But if you really want it and you really work and you're hungry enough, then my only advice is to just keep going.
And then kind of going back to, is it said mimic?
It's, you know, so it was called Mimic, M-E-M-E-C.
Okay.
But I don't want it to be confusing. And there's already like 7 movies called Mimic or The Mimic. And so I was like, well, it is about 2, so why don't we go Mimics? So Mimics.
Mimics. Okay. Thank you. Can you share a little bit about that plot line at all?
Sure. Mimics is about this guy, Sam, who is a comedian, not doing great. He's kind of bumming along in Reno. And one night he gets this invitation to join this very elite group of entertainers, a secret society of sorts. And all he has to do is sign the card. And he does. And then the next night a scout shows up, and then the scout invites him to meet an agent. The agent signs him, and off he goes. But he is assigned this puppet to work with, a prop named Fergus. And the movie begs the question, what are you willing to give to make your dreams come true? And so a lot of good stuff starts happening, but at a cost.
Kind of switching gears a little bit. What roles that you have portrayed have been the easiest and the hardest to prepare for?
The easiest role to prepare for was the character I played in Life Unexpected named Baze. He was just like me, but had I not cared. And then the hardest role, I think, to prepare for was John F. Kennedy Jr. Not only was it my first job that was going to be, you know, that widely seen, but I was also portraying a real person who had recently passed, and I wanted to do him justice. You know, I wanted to honor him. So there was a lot of pressure to get it right.
What movie have you been in that you think would have the most impact?
So reframe the question. What movie have I been in that I thought would have the biggest impact, or that I think has had the biggest impact?
That you think has had. Sorry.
You know, it's an interesting question. That's a good question. I think there's 2 movies that I've done that have had a lot of social relevance. The first one was Where Hope Grows. Mm-hmm. And that spoke to people within the Down syndrome community in a way that no feature film has ever done before. And since then they did, you know, like Peanut Butter Falcon. All of a sudden you've started seeing a lot more people on screen in much bigger roles who have Down syndrome. But we were the first movie to do that. Like we were the first movie to hire a lead actor who had Down syndrome and who had a major plot line and who was in as many scenes as David was in, and who carried, you know, had as many lines as David had. So that was a big deal. And to see the social ramifications of that movie still play out today is a big deal. It's a cool thing for that community, and then and really it's sort of enlarged to a lot of different special needs communities. It's impacted me personally. Like, I'm involved in the Down Syndrome Network of Northern Nevada. We do a fundraiser every year, the Lucky Few Fall Festival, and I don't know, it just opened my eyes to the fact that people are a lot more similar than we are different. So if you let the difference be a chasm between you, you're going to miss out on incredible opportunities to get to know some really special people. And that plays out like across the board. I mean, that's like a political thing. That's a whole, I mean, you could look at every quadrant of our society and say, well, if my differences are going to keep me, if the fact that you're different than me is going to keep me away from you, that's the problem. So I think that movie was amazing because it allowed me to bridge gaps that I'd never bridged before. And then this recent movie I did called The Shift has had a really profound impact on people who've watched it. And particularly, I've met a lot of men after that movie who've come up to me and literally just shaked my hand with tears in their eyes and said, you have no idea how powerful that movie was. And it helped me get through a really hard time in my life. And that on a broad scale is about a man who's being tried and who's going through trials and tribulations and who perseveres with hope and faith and sort of finds his way back home. So I think those two movies it's a toss-up between those two movies.
Yeah, we loved a company that I work with sent me a pre-screener of that movie, and we were really excited to see that. And it was a lot of fun to I personally am not overall a huge sci-fi person or dystopian person, and I really, really enjoyed that. I think my favorite scene was when you're in the cafe and then Neil McDonough's character is coming in and tempting you and you just start praying and then he disappears, because that's like a very, very impactful visual scene.
Yeah. And that was a great scene in the movie, and it gave people chills, man. When you're watching it, like, you can feel if you've ever felt like you've been attacked, like on a spiritual level, that's what it feels like. It's like you feel overwhelmed and you start praying and it all changes.
Yeah. Kind of following up on Where Hope Grows, and I know you mentioned the cause that you work for, but are there any causes that you support or that, you feel strongly about that you'd kind of like to get the word out about?
There's two that I'm working with right now. There's World Vision, and what they do, they do so many things globally. But I'm really proud to be an ambassador for them. And I think by the time folks can hear this, they have their catalog every year, and I've got there's these bracelets that I designed. You can get three in one, and you can give one to somebody that you love. It's like the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, basically, is the idea of it. And, that's been an amazing organization to be a part of. I've yet to go on a trip with them, but I keep getting invited. My schedule hasn't permitted yet, but I'm looking forward to the day when I'm going to get to go to Africa. I almost went to Maui this year to hand out backpacks to school kids and throw the fire, people who've survived the fire. And then, of course, the Down Syndrome Network of Northern Nevada. It is a really cool organization. It's run by these two women. They do all the heavy lifting themselves. But basically, they're building a network for families who have kids with Down syndrome, but any special needs that have to navigate the bureaucracy of the educational system or the medical system. And they help facilitate that. And they create this environment and community for kids to come and find, like individuals and find friendship and community and companionship. And it's a really special thing. So those are really the two that I'm hyper focused on right now.
All right. And then, kind of backwarding off of that into a different direction. You are a Christian, a husband, a father, an actor, an author, most recently a director. How have you learned to balance all of that?
You know, it's funny. I'm very loose as far as my flow goes. And so when I'm writing a book, I'm all in on the book, and everything else takes a back seat, as far as the work stuff goes. But as far as family goes, which always comes first for me, like I get up in the morning, I take my sons to school, and then I have this moment in the morning to write where I can let my wife sleep in, and I am basically undisturbed for about 2 hours every morning, and I can write and get that done. And then she wakes up, we spend time together, and then the kids come home, and then it's kind of like all about the kids again. So, and then being an actor is amazing because, when I'm not working, I'm 100% at home and available. And then to get a job, it takes about an hour and a half to put myself on tape to audition for these things. And, I try to get a job. Now, it's when I go to work, that becomes a bit of a sacrifice for everybody because I'm gone. But again, it's hyper-focused on that time that I'm away. So I'm not really bringing my work home, So there's everything in its place.
A lot of Hallmark fans ask this question with you writing and directing and starring in The Mimics. If you were to write, direct, and star in your own Hallmark movie, what would be your dream location to film? What would the plot be? And who would you want to co-star with?
Well, that I was going to have to say that Hawaii would be the place that I would love to film in. And I think it should be about a girl who's overworked. And so she's asked by her best friend to take over a coffee shop in Oahu and finds out that her best friend actually owns a coffee plantation and they both need saving. Meanwhile, she meets this mystery guy who we come to find out works for the evil company that wants to buy the plantation. And they fall in love, as people do. And I don't know, like Vanessa Hutchinson would be amazing. I'll put that out there.
Okay. Something else that a lot of fans were asking when I reached out, letting them know that I was going to be interviewing you, and they were sending in some questions, was how you and your wife met.
So years ago, I did a pilot called Third Degree for Fox. It was literally March of 2001. And my co-star was an actor named Jensen Ackles. And Jensen was always talking about his buddies back in LA. And one of his buddies was this girl, Julianne. And we actually talked on the phone, briefly. But, we were worlds apart. She was on Days of Our Lives. That's how she knew Jensen. I was a waiter in New York City who just landed his first acting job ever. And married the twain should meet. But as fate would have it, the director of the pilot needed to do some looping and some extra shots, and he needed to make those happen in New York City. So I got on a plane on a Wednesday. I was in LA, and Wednesday night I met Julianne at this place called Casa Vega. It's a famous Mexican restaurant. It's been around forever in the Valley. And it's funny because Jensen was like, "Do you want to meet my buddies?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I was expecting to go out and meet all of his guy friends, but lo and behold, in this giant group of dudes was this one beautiful girl. And we locked eyes, and we sat down at one table at first, but Julianne got sat between two guys she already knew, and she was like, "You know what? I don't think this table's big enough. I think we should move. And so she got the whole party to move to a new table where I had a choice to sit in the bench next to some guys or at the end of the bench next to her. And so I sat next to Julianne, and we just started talking. And we had this really incredible conversation. And then she said, "Do you want me to drive you to Jensen's house?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love that." And this giant black pickup truck pulled up from the valet, and she came in, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's a pickup?" And I got in, and we drove to Jensen's house, and then we just literally talked the whole night. We talked until sunrise. And then the next day I had to go to work. And that next night, she called Jensen, and she said, "What are you and your cute friend up to?" And I was like, And so we went to this place called Jones Diner. Again, spent the whole night talking. And she offered me a ride on the way to the airport the next morning, that Friday morning. I was heading back to New York City. And she said, "Hey, what are you going back to New York for?" And I said, "Nothing, really. I'm waiting to find out if the pilot is going to get picked up. I'm going to go wait tables, like nothing. I'm not going back for anything." And she was like, "I've got a spare room. Do you want to stay?" And I was like, now, there's two versions of the story. One version could have been that she was psychotic and that we were, it was one of those crazy, like, what are you getting yourself into? The other version is that, she was, at the time, she was waiting for marriage. And I knew that, actually. I think that had come up in conversation, or it was about to later that day. But it was something that was really, important to her. And so I knew what the nature of the invite was, which was like, do you want to just stay in LA and get to know me a little better and let me get to know you a little better? And I remember hearing this voice in my head that said, if you're going to be bold in anything, be bold in love. And I was like, yeah, I'll stay. And so literally on my way to LAX, she flipped to Yui. We went to Malibu. We hung out for a couple of days. I ended up going home to Reno for a while. I ended up going back to my high school to teach, went back to LA for a little bit, went back to New York. She came and visited me. But then by July 4th of that year, I moved lock, stock, and barrel to Burbank. I knew, I was like, this is the greatest reason to move to LA. Like, couldn't be a better reason to. And I didn't know. I didn't know if we were going to get married. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but I knew I really loved her. And I was excited to see what the future had in store for us. But I will say this, about a year into it, I remember the feeling I had when I was with Julianne was akin to this feeling I had. I did a semester at sea when I was in college. I went around the world on a boat. And it was honestly like the coolest 6 months of my life. It was amazing. And every day felt like it felt like Christmas. And every day there was a new adventure waiting. And every day there was community to get involved in. And it was fun. It was a really fun moment of my life. And I was seeing the whole world. Like, I went to Japan and China and Vietnam and India and Egypt. And I saw the pyramids on a horse. And I mean, it was like grand adventure stuff. And being with Julian felt the exact same way. And I remember being in the morning, I was taking a shower, getting ready for the day. And I was like, you know what though, Chris? This is like, you don't have to get off the boat. You can get on this ride forever if you want. And I think that was the moment when I decided I wanted to marry her.
That's really sweet. I just am 4 months married. So, and I know we talked about this last time we were able to chat, but I love hearing different stories of different couples and how long they've been married and things like that. So
it's good. It's a fun ride. I mean,
what was that?
But it's fun to be in it with somebody, and there's work involved. You got to stay in relationship, and you got to make sure that you honor each other. But it really is an awesome way to go through the world.
Yeah. What would be your one piece of advice for staying married? How long have you guys been married or together?
Yeah, we've been married 21 years, and we've been married for 21 years, and we've been dating for 23 years.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think my one piece of advice, and this is going to be only for the Christians in your audience because it only applies to Christians, but if you don't keep Jesus at the center of your relationship, you're not going to have a relationship very long. There's just too many things in life that'll pull you apart from each other. So I think when you have the accountability of Jesus and really trying to love each other the way that Jesus loves, it changes your, God says that marriage, when two people are married in that covenant, they become one. So there is this really sacred bond that happens that is, technically supernatural. Like, you're becoming a new entity. And I think there's a lot of things in the world that try to trick us to disrespect that union and to take it for granted and to not pay it. But when you are reminded that God made the family first, like it's before the church, like it's a holy thing, and to treat it such, I think it keeps you on that straight and narrow path. I think that's the only advice I can give. Everything else is a little bit cheesy or simple or silly.
Yeah. I think that's the best advice to give, is to keep Jesus at the center. So, because I agree, if he isn't, things will most likely fall apart. So definitely a subject change here, but can you give an update on the Kona books?
Yeah, I can. So happily, Anna Gomez and she's got a brand new book out right now. Mm-hmm. You should check it out on Amazon. I want to say it's called Somewhere Along the Way. Am I right?
Yes, Somewhere Along the Way. Yeah.
Yeah, by Anna Gomez. So you can get that right now and read her newest book, which is, and it's a cool book. I got to read the advanced copy of it. She does a great job. I am honored to be her partner. And so now that that's kind of on the shelves, I have her full attention, and we have begun book 3. So we are now officially writing book 3, which is exciting. We know where the story's going. We know who it's about. It's good stuff. We just started last week, so.
Awesome. And you guys have any idea on when you're looking at releasing that?
Our publishers need a 6-month lead. So whenever we finish, there'll be a 6-month gap from the finish and the edit to release. Our hope is sometime in 2025. But, I wouldn't be surprised if we want to do it right, that it's going to be like spring of 2026 maybe. But you might get 3 and 4 in one fell swoop. So it might be a twofer just for waiting so long.
Okay. Are there any other upcoming projects that you have that you can share about?
Oh, boy. Just the Christmas Quest, December 1st, only on the Hallmark Channel.
All right. You have any fun stories from on set of filming that one?
I love Lacey Chabert to pieces. It was so cold. We filmed in unbelievably cold weather. Like, you can't feel your face cold. You can't move your mouth cold. And she was a trooper. She was amazing. Like, she was out there every minute. Both of us. And I don't think there's a lot of actors who consider themselves a part of the crew. And so your crew is out there and they're in the cold. Now, granted, they have different outfits on and they've got the hats and the gloves and they can dress more warmly than actors can. But there's something about the camaraderie of like being in it with your crew. And Lacey certainly led by example. She was in it the whole time. She's really wonderful. I get it. Like I get why she's done 15 Christmas movies, 40 Hallmark movies. There's a billboard currently in LA with her pretty face on it, and I understand why. She's a really hard worker, and she's good at what she does.
You guys got to see the Northern Lights while filming that movie, didn't you?
Yeah. So that's a fun story. My son turned 18 while he was in Iceland, and I promised them Northern Lights. I said, I promise you guys you're going to see Northern Lights. Because I'd seen like glimpses of them. And by the way, my glimpses were just that. They were like little, like 1 or 2 little waves of green light in the night. You kind of look and you're like, is that a cloud? What is that? But I'd seen them. So I officially had seen Northern Lights, and I told my wife and kids, I was like, yeah, when you come here, you're going to see them. It's amazing. Well, they get there, and a whole week goes by, and every night, no Northern Lights, nada, nunca. And I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I promise you're going to see Northern Lights. And they're like, how can you promise us that? And I said, I promise you're going to see Northern Lights. I said, Micah, you're going to see them for your birthday, I promise. And I don't know what God was up to, but literally at the stroke of midnight on my son's 18th birthday, the sky erupted in color. And it was just the biggest, brightest, boldest display of Northern Lights that the entire crew had seen so far. And even Dustin and Andrew, our producer and director from the Christmas Quest, they'd been there. They'd filmed another movie prior. And they were like, this is the biggest display of lights we've seen yet. So we had a rental car, and I took my wife and kids. We got in the car, and we drove to this really dark spot on the island and looked up and just had this really beautiful moment celebrating the first minutes of Micah's 18th year of life. It was a cool way to bring him in.
That's awesome.
It really is. It's really cool. And then the next day we went glacier hiking, and we went, glacier hiking through an island. So not a bad way to spend your birthday, I don't think.
Yeah. Alrighty. And then kind of wrapping it up with one last question. What advice would you give someone wanting to get involved in making movies or something like that to stay grounded?
Well, again, I think all roads lead to Jesus. I think that you gotta keep your faith at the center of whatever dream you have. Specifically in Hollywood, it's so easy to get caught up in, because there's a very tangible energy in Hollywood that is very distracting and very worldly, that pulls you away from yourself and makes you like you're not even happy with who you are, because you want to be better and prettier and bigger and more famous and richer and all of the things. And I see a lot of people get caught up in it, and there's an energy, like it's its own church, you know? Mm-hmm. And there's definitely an energy in this town. And the only way I've discovered to sort of keep myself grounded is to stay in the Word, to stay in prayer. And I find that when I go through seasons where I'm not as diligent to pray and to read and to be faithful, I do get distracted and I do get pulled into it, because it is a very seductive energy. So if you're interested in being in the filmmaking business, and you want to be an actor, you want to be a writer, you want to be a director, a producer, or whatever, you've got to have something bigger than yourself to stay grounded to. Otherwise, you will get sort of swept up in it all.
Well, thank you so much for doing this tonight and fitting me in for an interview.
Well, Mercy, thank you for having me. We did an interview prior, and it sounded so bad, the quality, because I was in an airport, and I just didn't think that was fair. So I'm glad that you made the time to sit down with me again. Thank you.
Friends, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to a worthy conversation today. If you'd like to keep up with Kristoffer Polaha on social media, you can do so by following him at Polaha on Instagram and on Twitter. And if you're on Facebook, his account is just Kristoffer Polaha, and his page will pop right up. If you'd like to keep up with the podcast, just to know what's going on and who we'll be interviewing next, you can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at Mercy Sugar. And then on Facebook, my page is A Worthy Conversation hosted by Mercy Sugar. And if you would like to specifically know when a new episode will be released, you can just hit subscribe on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Can't wait to share this next interview with you guys very soon. I'm excited to share who we'll be with very, very soon.